And here we have Noah. Perfect. Right on time. Let's see if we're getting the audio all set up. Noah's coming from the we're missing the audio. But Noah's coming from the West Coast right now, so he's got that bright sun on him, working on the tan a little bit.
You got me?
Oh yeah, now we got you.
Cool.
So I did a quick introduction, pretty much an overview, but realistically, everyone, Noah Pompan, head of partnerships at MoonPay. He's got a lot more going on than just that for him, and a longer history, including a few different endeavors as well as a stint with Red Bull. But Noah, I'd love just quickly if you would introduce yourself, and then we can start moving into the nitty gritty of the progress and where you started and where you are now.
Absolutely. Joe, I only see you, so I don't know if anyone else is here, but
Yes, no, that's correct. So you'll see me, and then everyone else can see us.
okay, awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me first and foremost. I'm Noah Pompan. Normally live in New York, but I'm here in LA currently. Let me actually close my window really quick because I'm getting some noise from the street. Give me one sec.
Yeah, no problem. Typically when I hear that, I would think New York, because no matter how far away you are from the window, you can hear the street.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, let's start over. I'm Noah Pompan, Director of Partnerships here at MoonPay. Um, I actually went to college with Joe, and I think that's the last time we saw each other. So it's good to see you first and foremost. But I'm in LA currently. Normally live in New York. So made that transition last year. And I have a background in entrepreneurship. So took my first swing when I was in college on an ad tech company called Boom. Worked on that for like 2 years and ended up leaving that business and going to Red Bull, where I was a partnerships manager for about 3 years. Amazing job, amazing company. I'll also elaborate on that. Ended up leaving to take another swing at startup life and worked on a company called Plex Labs, which was a data management company and built plugins for tools like Salesforce and HubSpot, and went through an acquisition last May with MoonPay, which is a company in the crypto space, providing on and off ramps, in addition to other Web3 infrastructure, to partners across the entire ecosystem. So as part of the acquisition, my co-founders and I stayed on, and I've been working there full time since last May.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I've seen a lot of the growth, a lot of the traveling and networking that you've been doing for MoonPay, which looks like it's been very exciting. I know the Web3 space is pretty explosive right now, as far as the reach and the conferences. It's been a little quieter lately with I feel like, but
Yeah, the
certainly
AI is
probably is
definitely
going hand in hand.
AI is definitely the pretty girl at the prom now. It's I work with a lot of VCs too, and have a lot of friends in venture, and had gone through a fundraising process with Plex. And I only graduated college, 6 years ago, but in those 6 years, there's been these themes in VC, and it's pretty funny watching like how ephemeral some of these themes are. Things that are so hot stay hot for sometimes less than a year, and then there's another theme that takes over the zeitgeist, and then like themes then reemerge too. So I remember when I was in college, and this was 2014, 2015, AR and VR were really hot, and here in LA a lot of content studios were producing AR and VR content, leveraging all this Hollywood IP, and then that kind of went quiet for a few years. And now with Vision Pro releasing, it's now a part of mainstream conversation again. So maybe a deeper conversation around themes.
No, I love that. It made me think like quickly while we're on the topic of themes for students and budding entrepreneurs who are trying to come up with their idea who don't quite have it yet. What is the theme that you're noticing right now, or that is on the cusp of you think becoming part of the mainstream themes in VCs at the moment that maybe a young student entrepreneur might start to consider as a as an area of thought for where they might want to build something?
Yeah, so I think first of all, there's never a bad time to start. The hardest part is just starting. Um, there's always conversations, especially in the industry I'm now in emerging payments and blockchain enabled payments around the macro environment and high interest rates and less liquidity among investors. And these things typically have some truth to them. Like there are macro conditions that might make it hard to fundraise. But on the inverse, you see like amazing companies come out of really difficult macro environments. I think I saw this interview with the Airbnb founders around how they started Airbnb in the backdrop of the global financial crisis in 2008. And it was a terrible time to get a company off the ground if you just looked at macro conditions. And Brian Chesky was saying that there really is no bad time. Like you just need to peer over the precipice and really like have the internal inertia to get going. With all that being said, I mean, I have most perspective towards fintech. I think there's still a lot to be solved in fintech, more particularly in payments. Um, Cross-border payments is something that's really interesting to me. I just went on a surf trip to Mexico, and we're so used to going to drinks with our friends, right? And Joe, you pick up the tab, and I'll say I'll Venmo you, or I'll send you money on Cash App. That does not work if you are in the UK or if you are in Mexico. So on my surf trip, I didn't have I didn't have pesos, and the money exchange was closed at the airport, and I quite literally had no way to pay a cab driver. And the cab driver had a phone in his hand. I had a phone in my hand, but due to how our payment infrastructure is set up, I couldn't pay him. And like even in the UK, I was there this past summer. All my friends there use Revolut. I use Venmo as my primary peer-to-peer payment method. So try going through with a lease in New York City. I just went through this process, and it is still so difficult, and there's so much friction in transferring money, especially across borders. So luckily, I met this Swiss guy in the airport in Porto Escondido, and he was willing to hop in the cab with my buddy and I. And foot the bill, and we ended up seeing him in town later that week and buying him a drink. But payments is still a space where there's so much room for innovation. I think as AR and VR, we talked about it, continues to become a part of mainstream use cases. All the applications that we're used to using and being entertained by and spending our day on will need to be adapted for a different way of content consumption. I think I mean, AI is the buzzword, but if there's a more efficient way to sort data and leverage data and create content using some of these tools like Midjourney or OpenAI, I like I'll talk about this a bit later too. But with our deal ultimately joining MoonPay, I was able to save so much time and so much money using OpenAI to basically have GPT come up with all of our legal contracts in like
Mm.
4 minutes, and a lot of these forms that we had not been staying up to date with, I was able to create using an AI, and ultimately had a lawyer review them before submitting them. But it's just amazing the type of content you could create really quickly with some of these tools. So Um, I think there's no bad theme to focus on, right? Like, you got to find not only what you're passionate about, but what at the end of the day you think could be commercialized and ultimately monetized and turned into a business. Because the hardest part is like one, getting started, but also taking something that's an idea and turning it into a business versus a project. So uh, no bad themes. Just find something you're excited about. You could get up with some fire under your butt to get working on every day, and you could commit to for a period of at least a few years.
No, I love that. And especially talking about, I mean, getting started, definitely the hardest part. And we've heard it time and time again. But that next part of taking that idea and turning it into a business. Can you talk to me a little bit about kind of the early days with Boom and what the first steps looked like in terms of taking that from an idea to a product, and then eventually what the circumstances were around turning it into a business?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in maybe middle school or early high school, I remember visiting my dad at his office, and my dad works in finance, very traditional finance, working with larger, more established middle market companies. And I remember seeing this this business card for a venture fund in LA, and the branding was really cool. It had like surfboards on it, and the office was in Venice Beach. And at the time, Snapchat had this office on the Venice boardwalk, and that was one of the cornerstones of like tech the LA tech community was this little company called Snapchat. And I remember seeing this business card for Crosscut Ventures, and I go to my dad and I'm like, I want to talk to this guy, whose ever card this is. It was a guy named Rick Smith, who was and still is the GP at Crosscut Ventures. And I must have been in high school, like early on in high school. And I was playing lacrosse in high school at the time. It turns out Rick's son was on the team at a rival high school, and he was happy to chat. And I just knew from that day on I wanted to work around or with startups. I wanted to operate a startup. I wanted to invest in startups. I loved just the ethos of being around early stage entrepreneurs, and I felt that immediately walking into Rick's office in Venice. So I from that day on, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And um, and when I was in college, freshman year, they had this program called the Startup. I think it was called the Startup Experience, where there was this guy named Henrik who was an entrepreneur coach from Silicon Valley. That's not even a real job title, but he put on basically like an accelerator. And I was a freshman, and I go, this is what I want to do. I signed up for it. It was like a weekend thing. I stayed in from the parties going on at the lacrosse house, and I did this basically sprint on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it was based on this book, The Lean Startup, that everybody on this call should read at some point, by Eric Ries. And it was just really like a crash course on how to go from an idea to organizing your thoughts to putting together a deck and start building an MVP. And I did this course, and on the last day, I'm like, that's it. I'm starting a company. I'm a freshman in college. I'm like, and I'm on the East Coast. I'm at this small liberal arts college to play lacrosse, and I'm like, this is it. I need to start a company. And go to my best friend at the time, who goes to UC Santa Barbara, and we're talking about, okay, there's all these events happening around college campuses. College kids love going to bars and restaurants, and how do we like blend? How do we blend these things together? How do we match local businesses with events happening on campus, which at the time when you're in college, like that's your whole world, is like what parties are happening, what sporting events are happening. Your entire social life is in this little bubble. I think everybody on this call will probably resonate with that feeling. So basically, we this was like my first swing at launching a business, and we put together a deck using the framework from this weekend accelerator, the startup experience, for basically collating all the events happening on a college campus during a given week, and then serving those to local bars and restaurants to build programming around. So if there's like a sorority formal, a bar could have a local happy hour, or a coffee shop around like finals week could offer certain sales and incentives. And it was a way to easily communicate with local businesses around campus what's going on campus, and allowing students to benefit from those promotions. So think of it almost like a digital billboard that just listed out everything on campus. And then the business model was we would facilitate sponsorship opportunities between a sorority formal and a bar. Doesn't work so well on a small liberal arts campus, but at like UC Santa Barbara or UCLA or Colorado, it was something that we thought we could monetize. And I basically worked on it from freshman year through end of junior year. And my college had this startup competition we got 10 grand from. We ended up raising from angel off the back of that. I think we raised like 120 or 130K, which at the time felt like this astronomical amount of runway, which it really was for my buddy and I and some developers that we hired to work with us.
Yeah, I
But
was going to ask because as a college student, I know that you weren't specifically a coder.
no,
So your involvement in that obviously was kind of from a higher point of view. Were you managing the product in terms of communicating with developers and being like, this is what the functionality of the app is, what we're looking for, kind of coordinating with them to help you achieve that functionality and going back to them with revisions. Just for the purpose of anyone listening who is curious about app development from the point of view of not being a coder.
yeah, we brought on a dev shop, which as soon as you turn on, as soon as you update your LinkedIn to founder of any software company, you will be bombarded, absolutely bombarded by dev shops. And typically it's like the BD person or the face of the business will be in LA, San Francisco, Miami, New York. And what they do is in some cases, they'll take some equity in your business and then they'll charge you to build out the app. On the back end, they typically are hiring people in Bangalore, in India, or in Eastern Europe, and you're communicating with basically a PM, a product manager that in some cases is here in the US, or I think our product manager was in Argentina and Buenos Aires, but we had a point of contact that was in Venice Beach in LA. And we paid out of pocket, and then they took on some equity. We actually brought the the founder of our dev shop partner to UC Santa Barbara and had to meet with this pizza restaurant called Pizza My Heart, this bar, a coffee shop, and we like took him to a fraternity party. This guy was like married with two kids in his like late 40s, hanging out with like two 20-year-olds. And he liked the idea. So he gave us we paid him cash, but he liked the idea. He introduced us to an investor also who ended up, I think, writing a check for 50 grand. And then we were able to raise some more off the back of that. And that went to funding development with this dev shop. And if you
And
just Google, even if you Google dev shop, there'll be like a number of options that come up probably wherever, even locally to wherever you're all based.
And for students who are looking to build an app, tomorrow we have a skills session speaker, John Rush, who's really going to be talking about the importance of landing pages and website, or I
Yeah.
mean, idea validity. But for finding investors and partners for Boom for this project, how far along was the app in terms of functionality and user base when you were securing funding, or did you have an idea with a lot of support and potential users? How far along were you when you started pitching it to people saying this is what we need in order to get to this next stage for that next big step?
So we won this startup competition
Yep.
with a deck and a wireframe, and it's pretty easy. Uh, if you spend some time playing around with Figma, you could pull together some wireframes, download them, and then kind of customize them or tweak them on Figma. At the time, we were using a product called Envision, which I think is just shutting down, but it was basically a precursor to Figma. You definitely want to have a sense of like what the product looks and feels like. You don't need all the features nailed down, but you need a basic flow. For example, if you're building a product in payments, you should have like the flow of user funds mapped out. If you're
Yeah.
building a mobile application, you want to be able to articulate what it does and then ultimately how you'll make money off of it. Um, I think between a deck and some wireframes, that's what's most important. Um, uh, to actually raise money, we were in development and had like a pretty clear launch date in mind and planned this like launch party around it. It felt like the most serious thing at the time, but in hindsight, it was a good crash course, but is not the end all be all of my career.
Yeah. Do you find similar pressures associated with launching like for Plex or MoonPay? Did you find the seriousness of that transferred, or is it now like what used to be a really big deal to you when you were working on Boom now is a pretty minute event or kind of step for these larger projects, if that makes sense?
I think it's the latter. I think it's similar to most things in life. The more experience you have, the least scary it becomes, and then also habits, good and bad habits, tend to compound. I think most things in life tend to compound in either direction, and momentum's a real thing. So that's why at the beginning of this call, Joe, I was saying you got to just get started because like it's so easy to fall into analysis paralysis or feel like you don't have all the pieces in place, but just getting started and learning what it feels like to be up against deadlines or what it feels like to have like investors' money being burned and needing to ship software like that is something that you should be exposed to and have as many experiences uh, as possible. So anyway, like just to put a bow on this whole Boom thing, we ended up launching it at UCSB. We launched it at like 10 different campuses. I was playing lacrosse in college. I went abroad to Berlin where I also had an internship at a startup accelerator in Berlin, which I got course credit for. Like if you have the opportunity to go abroad in college, do it. If you have the opportunity to work abroad, do it. If you have the opportunity to do that while you're also working on a startup, do it. I think like your 20s are all for getting a ton of experience. I'm still in my 20s on the back half in my late 20s, but it's all about just like trying things. And Plex we ran it for, I'm sorry, Boom, we ran for like 2 years, ended up sort of plateauing. One of our advisors was like, Noah, get a job, parlay this into a job. And I ended up landing this amazing job at Red Bull where I did partnerships for 3.5 years and got the itch to do a startup again and ended up, and ended up taking the leap again in the beginning of 2022. So just over 2 years ago. So yeah,
And
sorry, Boom was a great experience in college. I'm so glad I did it. And would encourage everyone on this call to take the swing.
oh yeah, I know I kind of rabbit holed us into a lot of the Boom talk just because I know that so many of the people that are watching this and will watch this are students, and I think one of the most daunting things is finding the time and energy to take those next steps, or even if you have an idea while you're at school, figuring out what is like you said, the bare minimum to come in is for those types of prize money competitions is a deck and a wireframe, which is, I think, anyone who's taken a college level course can probably put together a deck and a wireframe if they go to Y Combinator and look up how to do so.
For
As far
sure.
as Plex and MoonPay, how did Plex come to be, and what were the first couple steps that you took when taking the leap away from Red Bull and then going into Plex?
Yeah. So my job at Red Bull was the most fun, incredible networking opportunity. Um, I had such amazing partners that I basically was the liaison between all the IP that Red Bull sits on. So Red Bull is a producer of energy drinks, but sponsors athletes across over 100 different sport disciplines. Um, we own teams across Formula One and professional soccer. We produce content from feature films to live events. I still say we, even though I left over 2 years ago, but the brand sits on so much IP, and Red Bull owns most of that IP, and they license it out. They license it, the athlete and culture IP to other brands, production companies, tech and media entities that create their own content or their own advertising around this content that Red Bull produced. So that was basically my job, was to sit between Red Bull, media companies like streaming services, think Netflix, HBO Max, um, tech companies like Magic Leap and Oculus. And I ended up working a lot with the Web3 companies that were licensing IP from Red Bull. So towards the end of my job there, NBA Top Shot was getting really hot, where people were basically trading digital trading cards with NBA content tied to them. Um, Red Bull signed a global deal with Tezos, which is a blockchain partner, and Tezos got all sorts of deliverables as part of that sponsorship, including their logo on the F1 car and the F1 driver logo. They had their logo on the F1 driver kits. And Red Bull was also on the hook for all these all these marketing campaigns that were basically built on top of Tezos. So you could own pieces of Red Bull racing memorabilia that was digitally tied to NFTs. And when I was working in Berlin, when I was still in college with this internship I had referenced earlier, there were all these amazing crypto companies, particularly early Ethereum developers that were living and working in Berlin at the time that I was there. So that was my first real deep dive into crypto when I was in college studying abroad in Berlin. And that space was always really fascinating to me, and stayed in touch with a lot of these people I met at my internship at Beta House in Berlin during college that were working around Ethereum. So I was just immediately like obsessed with the partners that we were working with at Red Bull, and I put together business cases to go to a lot of the crypto conferences, and I saw how most of the infrastructure that brands use to target relevant audiences is relying upon cookies. When you go to websites, you have to opt in to allowing cookies now. The availability of cookies is really shrinking. They're basically being deprecated. iOS on mobile, you can't access mobile browsing or mobile app cookie data as easily as you once would, and it's affecting the entire advertising ecosystem. And as this is happening, I'm sitting at Red Bull, which spends an astronomical amount of money on digital advertising. I saw this new abundant form of user data that was living on blockchains. This is something that was at the time super speculative, and people were trading NFTs to really make money. And there was this like absolute craze around photos of monkeys with Bored Ape Yacht Club and
Yeah.
Meebits pixelated PFPs that people were like obsessing over, making so much money trading. But at the same time, they're emitting so much data about themselves that sits on a public ledger. So there was kind of um, this really vivid like aha moment for me, where I'm thinking like, okay, this new form of user data, I believe is going to revolutionize digital advertising because cookies are going away. It's harder to find relevant audiences, yet people are spending so much time and money telling the world about themselves on this publicly available blockchain. Um, and I ended up leaving Red Bull to start a company that was able to take blockchain-based data and make it compatible with the tools that companies already use to track their users. So how do you make blockchain data legible to Salesforce or HubSpot or Segment or Amplitude? That requires you to index a blockchain, organize user data, make it searchable, or queryable, and use that data to reach relevant audiences and organize it in tools like Salesforce. And that was the thesis for our company Plex. And left Red Bull, had some really great co-founders on it, worked on that for about a year and a half, and then we had been speaking really closely to MoonPay over like the back half or 6 to 8 months of working on the company, and they made a really compelling offer for my co-founders and I to join full time.
That's awesome. And I know we're running out of time here for the session, but for people who are interested in learning more about MoonPay and how it's going to affect them in the next few years as Web3 continues to develop, what should they know about MoonPay and how can they learn more?
Yeah, of course. And Joe, I feel like I've been like hogging a lot of the airtime here. I
No,
usually
you've been
make these.
crushing it. Do not worry.
Okay, great. I normally like to make these things like more collaborative and answer questions, and not just be talking at people because that's a pet peeve of mine when I'm sitting in the audience. So I hope I'm not like just lecturing and going on these really wild diatribes here. So I
No,
am
don't
available.
worry. Leaving the people wanting more.
Okay, great.
And
Yeah, if you guys
I'll
have
put
any
together some
questions,
questions.
if you have any questions, or just want to jam, find me on LinkedIn or Instagram, or my email is just my first name dot last name noah.pompan@moonpay.com. I'll have Joe distribute that. MoonPay is an amazing business. It's a way to access the blockchain, to democratize access via on ramps, off ramps, wallets, all the components necessary to interact on this new information superhighway that is going to connect all the applications that we use. MoonPay is developing these types of products. At its core, we are a way to use traditional payment methods for blockchain-based applications. You could think of us as like a PayPal gateway, a payment gateway that lets you use alternative payment methods, such as crypto. And it's a great organization to be a part of. Really well funded, brilliant people that work there, and feel super fortunate to be a part of the organization.
Amazing. Well, yeah, Noah, thank you so much for jumping on and telling us about your story. It's really fascinating to hear about really your early starts at Gettysburg, especially knowing that there was so much going on behind the scenes after lacrosse and on weekends when you were staying in that it was all building to this moment.
We definitely
Um,
had fun too, and yeah, I encourage everyone also to like, you know, it's a long race, hopefully. So have some fun along the way. Like, go on the trip, go to the party. Just make sure you're waking up and taking care of what you need to take care of.
Otherwise, you won't be able to run a sub 3 marathon.
Thank you.
Oh
Cool.
yes,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for jumping on, Noah. Really appreciate it.
See ya.